Beneath the shimmering veil of Ularon's sky, where twin suns hung like judgmental gods over a dying world, King Arkiv stood alone in the observatory of bone glass. The floor beneath his feet was polished star mica, cold as regret. Beyond the colossal windows, the planet wheezed through its last golden age. Once, Ularon had been a jewel among the 12 spiral realms, a place where minds sculpted light into matter, and ships leapt across galaxies on currents of thought. Now, the gravity was patchy, the moons were cracking, and the air smelled vaguely like burnt toast. Not even royal filtration systems could keep up with the rot. In the center of the room, nestled inside a capsule of biolattice, lay Lethea, his daughter. Skin pale as lunar ash, eyelids fluttering like moth wings. Even now her long ears curved gently toward the sky, as though listening for something. Mercy, maybe. She had never been strong. The healers had called her condition chronocellular degeneration, a fancy term for ticking time bomb. Arsiv had forbidden them from saying it aloud, as if silence could outwit biology. I built cities that sang, he muttered to no one, voice fraying. But I can't even keep one child alive. A soft chime interrupted his bitterness. Transmission secured, announced Thal, his aging council drone, who floated in with the grace of a tired bowling ball. The human has arrived. Human, Arsiv echoed. He said it like an insult, like rash or tax collector. Moments later, the doors slid open with a hiss that always reminded him of his ex-wife, and in swaggered the human, Ryan Vex. Tall, scruffy, jacket too loud for diplomacy. A cybernetic eye blinked erratically in his skull, clearly reprogrammed using something illegal. He smelled like plasma coolant and citrus gum. So, Ryan said, casually nodding toward the capsule, this your kid or your paperweight? Arsiv's expression could have boiled glass. Joke, Ryan added quickly. I do that when I'm nervous, or bored, or in the presence of kings with murder eyes. He strolled forward, examining Lethea through the membrane. His gaze behind the sarcasm was sharp, analytical, compassionate even if you squinted through the idiocy. I've read the med files. Your stasis tech slowed her decay, but didn't stop it. Neural pathways are flaring like fireworks. That means her brain's still fighting to live. That's good. Arkiv stepped forward, voice low. She's not a mission. She's not cargo. She's a kid, Ryan replied. One who got dealt a crap hand. I get it. Will you keep her alive? Ryan scratched his chin, then shrugged. I'll do my best. And if that fails, I'll do something stupid, expensive, and possibly heroic. It was oddly the most reassuring answer Arsiv had received in decades. With a final touch of the control panel, the capsule opened like a flower, and Lethea was lifted gently into Ryan's arms. She didn't stir, but her fingers twitched around the hem of his jacket. He looked down at her, then up at the king. I'll take her to Earth. I've got a lab there, and a bunch of questionable friends. Also, great tacos. Tacos? Flat bread, angry meat, healing properties. You'll see. Arkiv nodded slowly, then stepped back. She has my blood. That means she's more dangerous than she looks. Ryan grinned. So am I. They left as the suns began to set, casting Ularon in bruised light. Behind them, Thol sighed. Shall I log this as the moment we handed the royal heir to a space hobo? Log it, Arsiv said, not looking away from the window, and pray the stars made her stubborn. The door hissed shut. Outside, the sky cracked with quiet thunder. The junk Swan was not what one might call a reputable vessel. In fact, calling it a vessel at all was generous. At best, it resembled a flying toaster held together by magnets, duct tape, and what Ryan Vex called deeply personal optimism. As it sputtered out of Uluron's orbit, trailing a plume of rainbow ion residue that was probably harmless, Rion hummed an old Earth tune, mostly to distract himself from the fact that his new passenger was one critical systems failure away from becoming royalty-flavored jam. Lethea lay in the medical pod in the back cabin, surrounded by a symphony of beeping monitors and questionable modifications. Her long ears twitched faintly in her sleep, and the faint silver tattoos along her temples shimmered with neural feedback. She looked less like a dying alien princess and more like a fragile comet, frozen mid-fall. "Okay, princess," Ryan muttered as he typed commands into the terminal. "Let's figure out what exactly is wrong with you, besides a complete disregard for robust mitochondrial structure." He winced as the pod blinked red for the third time. "And maybe, just maybe, try not to explode." The ship's AI, a semi-sentient program named Peanut, built from repurposed dating app algorithms, popped up on the holoscreen. "Ryan, your stress levels are elevated. Should I play whale sounds? Or maybe one of your favorite Earth films, Die Hard with Puppies?" "No, Peanut, just run the diagnostics and delete Die Hard with Puppies." "That was a mistake." "Noted, but just so you know, it's in your top 3 comfort flicks." Peanut, deleting with sadness. As Ryan bent over the console, Lethea stirred. Not fully awake, but her body, long uncooperative, was beginning to twitch like wires remembering the flow of current. He watched her for a moment, the way her chest rose and fell in slow, uncertain rhythm. Back when he'd first accepted the king's plea, he'd assumed it was just another high-risk, high-pay drama. Royal kid, mysterious disease, maybe some evil cousins, standard fare. But the scans told a more complex story. Her DNA was laced with ancient quantum signatures, the kind he'd only seen in weaponized biotech relics from the Third Galactic collapse. She wasn't just sick, she was unfinished. "Right," Rian muttered, cracking his knuckles. "Time for some creative science." 3 hours later, the medbay resembled a mad alchemist's workshop. Ryan had grafted together equipment from 3 different species: a Zarnian neurostimulator, prone to singing, an old Terran cardiac patcher, prone to sparking, and a Nanovian bloodstream flusher, prone to existential crises. He swore he could hear the devices arguing. "I don't think I'm FDA approved," the cardiac patcher wheezed as Rian slapped it onto Lethea's chest. "Good," Ryan replied. "Neither am I." The procedure was brutal. Her body thrashed against the surge of life. Her heartbeat spiked, crashed, surged again. The tattoos lit up like constellations in a war zone. For a moment, he thought he'd lost her. Then her eyes shot open, silver-irised, fire-lit, terrified, and she screamed, the kind of scream that bent metal. Peanut cut the ship's gravity to soften her collapse, and Lethea floated gently to the medbay floor, flailing like a cat in a zero-G bathtub. Ryan rushed to her, grabbing a stabilizer injector and yelling over the alarm. "Welcome to Earth Customs. Please declare all psychic weapons and emotional baggage at the airlock." Lethea blinked, dazed, chest heaving. What is this place?" He grinned, handing her a protein bar and a knit cap that read, "Spicy Nuggets So." "Home for now." She didn't understand. Not yet. But she took the bar, bit into it, and winced. "This tastes like feet." "Good," Ryan said. "That means your taste buds work." And in the background, the stars kept moving. The jungle world of Eden 6 was technically a military training station, but calling it that was like calling a black hole a little tug. It orbited a blue dwarf star and boasted an ecosystem designed entirely to terrify, maim, and improve combatants. Giant insects, hyper-evolving flora, weather systems that flirted with sentience. Eden 6 was what you got when a sadistic botanist and a bored warlord teamed up over cocktails. It was also the perfect place for Lethea to stop dying and start surviving. Ryan's ship, the junk Swan, crash-landed on the edge of Eden 6's habitable zone with the grace of a flying fridge hurled by a drunk god. The moment the landing gear hit dirt, and some unfortunate creature that sounded like a rubber chicken, Ryan clapped his hands. "Welcome to boot camp," he declared, "where the trees eat you and the grass files complaints." Lethea, now strong enough to walk, albeit with an occasional lean like a glitching android, stepped onto the soil in her reinforced boots. The air smelled like citrus and electrical fires. Her long ears twitched cautiously. "Are we supposed to be here?" she asked, eyes scanning the bioluminescent underbrush. "Technically, no," Ryan admitted, "but technically, I've never been supposed to be anywhere." She frowned, glancing up at the artificial sun blinking in the sky like it was having an existential crisis. You stole access codes again, didn't you? Borrowed, permanently. Thus began Lithia's training. Every morning before the fake sun finished buffering its rays, she ran through terrain simulations that tried to kill her. Sometimes it was magnetic storms, other times sentient mudslides that told dad jokes. Looks like you're stuck in a rut. She learned to fire plasma rifles, override AI defense systems, and gut a laser-fanged frog with a spoon. Rian trained her with a surprising lack of mercy and a shocking surplus of burritos. Her body adapted fast, unnaturally fast. Her muscles, once threadbare from years of illness, rebuilt like nanosteel under pressure. She healed quicker, jumped higher, hit harder, and her mind, sharp and curious, began asking dangerous questions. "What am I becoming?" she asked one night, sitting atop a rusted observation tower as lightning flickered across the artificial horizon. "Whatever you want," Ryan replied, sipping something fizzy that hissed in 4 languages. "But ideally someone who doesn't punch me in my sleep." Their routine was soon disrupted by the arrival of Chirp, a personality module drone the size of a small watermelon and twice as annoying. It introduced itself by zapping Lithia's leg and calling her meatbag in training. "Motivational protocol enabled," it chirped. "You are only 4.2% less useless than yesterday." "I'm going to melt you down and wear you as earrings," she muttered. "I do come in silver." But despite the snark and the occasional electrocution, Chirp's programs were invaluable. It assessed her reflexes, measured progress, and pushed her limits. She began to beat the combat sims. Then she began to break them, one by one. Weeks bled into months. The girl who had once struggled to lift her own limbs now crushed stone with her fists. Her long ears, once folded in fragility, now rose like antennae tuned to war. Even the jungle began to fear her, or at least learned to scream less enthusiastically when she walked by. Still, Ryan never let her forget who she was. Not a weapon, but a person. "You've got scars," he told her one night, watching her spar against a droid twice her size. "Good. That means you didn't break. You bent, and bent metal stronger." "Why do your pep talks always sound like broken toaster metaphors?" "Because toasters are noble creatures." She laughed, ducked under a punch, and drove her elbow through the bot's chest plate. By the end of her first year on Eden 6, Lithia was no longer the porcelain girl hidden beneath a king's worry. She was a warrior, scarred, smirking, armed with fists, tech, and the kind of stubborn humor that burned brighter than the sun overhead. And somewhere, deep in the code of the training system, an alert blinked red. Subject exceeding expected parameters. Notify Uleron command. Reinforcements advised. The wreckage of the Skybone looked like a Leviathan skeleton caught mid-roar, half buried in the sands of Varnus Delta. Once a flagship in Uleron's ancient fleet, it had been lost during the Threx incursion and never recovered. Rumors said the ship had been cursed, or haunted, or possibly just very poorly designed. Its data cores, however, were priceless, and somewhere within, buried under layers of metal and ghost code, was a whisper of Lithia's past, which was exactly why Ryan brought her here. Also, he owed a favor to a pirate queen who really wanted a few of Skybone's weapons modules. But that was a side quest. "All right," Ryan said as the junk swan sat down with its usual combination of panic and prayer. "Breathe deep, stretch your limbs, and mentally prepare to be chased by something with too many legs." Lithia raised an eyebrow. "That's not very reassuring." "Good, that means you're paying attention." The ship's ramp lowered with a hydraulic groan that sounded vaguely like disappointment. Outside, the wind hissed over dunes of glittering rust and twisted metal. The wreck loomed like a cathedral of war, its broken towers silhouetted against a pale violet sky. Light flickered deep within, motion perhaps, or malfunctioning drones still trapped in combat loops. Lithia stepped off the ramp, armor humming faintly with internal systems. Her ears twitched at the strange frequencies in the air, static, language fragments, whispers encoded in machine. She tilted her head. "This place is speaking." "Old AI echoes," Ryan said, donning his rebreather. "The ship's systems probably went insane centuries ago. Don't answer if they start flirting." "Flirting? I had a refrigerator once that got way too attached. Long story. Don't open random doors. The halls of the Skybone were filled with dust and data. Wall panels pulsed with failing code. Robotic limbs hung from ceilings like rusted chandeliers. Lethea moved ahead, nimble and sure, while Ryan hacked into consoles, cursing under his breath and occasionally asking Peanut for backup. "Peanut," he whispered, "open the central archive." "Request denied. System requires password." Ryan sighed. "Try password 123. Denied. Also predictable." Eventually, they reached the heart of the ship, a cavernous chamber with a cracked holocore in its center. Lethea approached cautiously. As she reached out, the machine flared to life with a hiss of heat and light. A projection burst upward, flickering images. Her father, her mother. She was small, no ears yet, still hairless from the growth chamber. The king cradled her like something sacred. Beside him, her mother's eyes shimmered, calm, unshaken. The projection played scenes of her first steps, her first collapse, and then the decision to send her away. "She will die here," her father said, voice breaking. "But out there, she might live." Lethea stood frozen, throat tight. "She loved you," Rian said gently. "She never stopped. And he broke his own law sending you away. They left me. They gave you a future." Before she could answer, the air cracked. Metal groaned. Shadows moved. A voice spoke from the dark. "Lethea of Uleron, the failed heir lives." Uleron assassins, two of them cloaked in adaptive armor, stepped from the gloom with blades drawn. Royal, ceremonial, very sharp, very illegal. "They sent you?" Lethea asked, eyes narrowing. "You are a threat. You should never have survived." "I get that a lot." She moved. The fight was fast and brutal. Sparks flew as plasma met blade. One assassin lunged. She caught him midair and drove him into a wall hard enough to make the ship sigh. The second slashed, caught her across the ribs. She hissed, twisted, and countered with a shock blast that shorted his cloak. "Stand down," Ryan yelled, "or she'll turn you into earrings." Lethea ducked, rolled, came up with both fists glowing. "I don't need a throne," she said as she brought one assassin to his knees, "but I will defend the memory of those who gave me breath." The last strike echoed like thunder. Silence followed. She stood over the fallen, chest heaving, blood seeping down her side. Ryan stepped beside her, impressed and alarmed. "You're going to need stitches, and probably therapy." She wiped her blade on her jacket. "I'll settle for a sandwich." And as they left the broken ship, the Skybone sparked one last time, its long-dead systems registering her name. Lethea, active. Status, unclassified threat level. Recommend planetary alert. The skies above Uleron no longer shimmered. They boiled. Once known for its opalescent atmosphere and graceful orbital gardens, the planet now trembled beneath the iron boot of the Threx dominion. The twin suns still rose, but dimmer, as if in mourning. Great banners bearing the jagged sigil of Threx hung over the capital's broken towers, flapping like the tongues of conquerors. What had once been a city of song and starlight now pulsed with surveillance drones and the sour scent of scorched circuitry, and into this fell storm descended. The junk Swan. "Well," Ryan muttered from the pilot's seat as alarms blinked politely and unhelpfully. "Good news is we're not dead yet. Bad news is we're not even close to crashing stylishly." Lethea stood beside him, armored and unreadable. Her ears twitched with every incoming frequency. Military chatter, riot reports, drone patrol routes. Her newly grafted armor, stitched from Eden 6 alloys and fragments of Skybone tech, hummed with quiet menace. A repurposed plasma core glowed across her back like a dormant star. "I'd call this a warm welcome," she said, watching the sky filled with Dominion patrols. "But I think they forgot the fruit basket." "Maybe it got vaporized," Ryan offered. "Like everything else." They touched down under a cloaking veil behind the shattered shell of the old Royal Observatory. The building, once her father's pride, now sagged like a wounded beast. Ivy strangled its spires. The glass dome had been blown out and replaced with rusted surveillance rigs. The stars, once studied from this place, were now watched only as potential threats. Lithia crouched low, scanning the perimeter. Threx security's heavier than expected. That's what I say every time I go to the dentist, Ryan replied. But we've got stealth tech, a broken moral compass, and an extremely vengeful princess. Let's ruin someone's day. Their mission was twofold: ignite a rebellion and retrieve the last surviving echo of Aluron's planetary AI, hidden deep beneath the capital. With the AI's help, they could disable the Dominion's neural grid and turn the tide. But first, they had to reach it without dying. Easier said than done. The city was crawling with Threx enforcers, genetically fused with war gear, their faces half mask, half snarl. Lithia moved like smoke between patrols, disabling bots with a tap, flipping through access panels like puzzle books. Ryan followed behind, slightly less graceful, at one point getting stuck in a vending machine during an ill-timed snack break. "You're eating now," she hissed, hauling him out by the belt. "I operate best under the influence of sugar and irrational confidence." They reached the catacombs just as an overhead patrol passed. Within the depths, stone met circuitry. This was the womb of echoes, the AI's cradle, buried when the Threx took control. Lithia placed her palm on a crystalline interface. It awakened. Light pulsed outward, forming a sphere of voice and memory. Her mother's voice, calm, clear, filtered through. "If you are hearing this, my daughter, then you have survived." Lithia froze. Her breath caught like a glitch in her chest. "You were not born to rule. You were born to change everything." The AI flickered, scanning her. It read her scars, her strength, her rewritten genome. Command key accepted. Reactivation begun. Above, the Dominion's grid trembled. Rion said, watching the lights flicker red. "I think we just rang the Galactic doorbell." The ground shook. Sirens wailed. Dominion dropships screamed across the sky. Lithia turned to Ryan, eyes burning like novas. "They're coming." He drew his sidearm, grinning like a man with nothing left to lose. "Let's show them what we learned in Jungle Summer Camp." The AI's defenses roared to life. Drones rose from hidden compartments. Security beams blinked back online. And in the middle of it all stood Lithia, no longer the girl in the capsule, no longer the burden passed from a desperate king to a stranger. She was a storm, and her home had just remembered her name. The Hall of Echoes, once a sanctuary of knowledge and light, now roared with the fury of rebellion. Shattered windows refracted the chaos beyond. Blaster fire lighting up the marble walls, smoke curling like wounded spirits along the vaulted ceiling. At its center, beneath the fractured emblem of Uleron's royal line, Lithia stood, bloodied, battered, and unbroken. Before her, the Dominion's general loomed. High Executor Varn, a cybernetic behemoth whose voice clanged like steel against bone. His arms, augmented with siege-grade weapons, hissed with cooling gases, and his eyes glowed a sickly yellow behind his skeletal visor. "You were a myth," he spat, stepping over the bodies of fallen rebels. "A sickly air, a ghost. Now you fancy yourself a savior?" "I don't fancy anything," Lithia said, adjusting the plasma shears on her gauntlets. "I just got tired of being dead weight." He charged, seismic steps rattling the stone. She met him head-on, blades crackling, their clash throwing sparks high into the smoke-veiled dome. The impact knocked her back, but she rolled, came up low, and slashed. Metal sang as it met metal. The fight was raw, brutal, without pause. And in every move she carried not just training, but fury, memory, and a bit of Ryan's completely impractical flair. Meanwhile, outside, the rebellion raged. Uleron's citizens, long silenced, now surged through the streets like fire through dry grass. Ryan, patched up and proudly wielding a stolen Dominion cannon twice his size, barked orders from a hoverpad. "Chirp! Give me a flank sweep on Grid 6. Already done. And might I say, you look heroic today." "Save it for the victory speech." The AI core, now fully integrated beneath the city, pulsed with coordinated commands, jammed Threx comms, reactivated defense turrets, and unlocked ancient archives of Aluron's tech, once thought lost. In the hall, Lithia took a knee, fainting injury. Varn lunged, roaring triumph, and she detonated the plasma cell beneath his armor. The blast threw him across the room. His body struck a collapsed pillar and didn't rise. Silence fell, broken only by the flicker of ruined lights. Lithia stood slowly, blood dripping down her temple, one eye swelling shut. Her armor hissed and sparked, and her long ears twitched once before going still. She didn't smile. Not yet. She stepped to the center of the hall. The throne still stood, untouched by battle, cracked by time. Ryan limped in behind her, dragging his ridiculous cannon like a loyal pet. "You're not seriously going to sit on that thing," he said. She looked at it, thought of her father, her mother, the frail girl who once coughed through every sunrise. "No," she said at last. "I'm not here to rule." He nodded, stepping beside her. "Then what now?" "Rebuild, reclaim, rewrite." And they did. Under Lithia's leadership, Uleron shed its monarchy. She formed the Concord of Free Systems, a coalition of planets once oppressed by the Dominion. Ryan stayed on as her advisor/chaos consultant. Chirp was promoted, regrettably, to Minister of Morale, though he insisted on being addressed as Supreme Vibe Officer. Peanut finally got its own chassis and immediately joined a dance troupe. And Lithia trained new defenders. She taught them strength, strategy, and the importance of snacks in long missions. She bore the weight of her legacy, not like a crown, but like armor. Scarred, flexible, worn with pride. One day, years later, she stood again in the observatory of bone glass. The air was clean, the sky shimmered. Children played in the shadow of rebuilt spires. Her reflection caught in the glass, a warrior with long silver ears and quiet eyes. "I made it," she whispered to no one. The stars, once so distant, blinked back in approval. And far above, in the silence between worlds, the junk swan drifted peacefully, its engines finally quiet, its story written in full.